So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to Jordan and Brian. I'm really excited to hear the conversation. So thanks, guys. Take it away.
Thanks, Topher. I just want to, again, I did this last time, but I do want to thank Topher. He pulls a ton of weight in all of this. Thank you, Topher, for making sure this always happens. Yep. He never thanks himself, so we have to do it. But I also want to thank Brian Stewart, who I'm really excited to have here with you all tonight. Brian and I crossed paths a little bit at Nike, but now Brian is the co-founder of an organization called Electrify Now, which is a volunteer organization devoted to educating energy consumers and homeowners about the benefits of electrification and the role we can all play to accelerate our transition to clean and renewable energy for a sustainable future. Brian has 30 plus years of experience in product design, manufacturing, and sustainability. He held a variety of leadership roles at Nike, including Vice President of Sustainable Innovation, where I got to see him in action, and he's quite an impressive leader from that perspective. So join me in thanking Brian for coming here to chat with you all tonight. Brian, thank you. Format, I'm just going to ask a couple questions like we typically do, and then we'll open it up for Q&A for all of you. So Topher, give me the high sign if we're running long. But I have a couple things that I was curious about in Brian's gig, and hopefully you'll all get some value out of that, and then save some of your thoughts for the hard-hitting questions when we're done. Cool? Brian, thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Maybe just for everybody's benefit, could you start with just an overview of Electrify Now, kind of the mission, vision, and what you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so about 4 years ago when I left Nike, I was, after enjoying several months of not going to work and riding my bike a lot and all that stuff that you do, when you're retired, you have time, which is a luxury. And so I had time to dive into some things that I was always curious about. And one of them was what ordinary people can do to fight climate change. And I had been doing this thing sort of as a side gig at Nike in creating lists about the top 10 things you can do and all this kind of stuff. But I had time to really dive into it when I retired, and I was blown away by what I didn't know as a sustainability executive and corporate sustainability officer, I guess you'd call it, in terms of the real role of energy and all of the climate problems, and then more optimistically, what all these amazing solutions that are available to us right now. And so it kind of turned into this, like my wife says, yeah, he would come in from, I have this kind of studio place where I was able to geek out on this stuff. He'd come in for dinner and just be like excited about all these things that I discovered on the internet, and it's true. And I was like, why is nobody talking about this? This was like 4 years ago. It's changed a lot in that 4 years, but at the time there was really nobody talking to consumers and regular people about this. There was policy stuff going on and some really important things going on, but it hadn't leaked into the public dialogue. The public dialogue at that time was all about recycling and plastics waste and straws. Remember straws? Yeah. Straws. So that's what was consuming all the kind of oxygen in the room, so to speak, on sustainability. So I was like, how come nobody's talking about this? And we are reasonably well connected to Sierra Club and some other groups like that. And I was like, so I talk to them and say, why are you not talking about electrification to your own people? And basically everyone had a lousy answer for that question, but an adequate one, I guess, at the time. And so basically my wife and I, she's the other co-founder, decided to just do this on our own, and not really knowing where it would go at all, but feeling like it was like a need. Somebody needed to be telling the story because it was like too good to be true almost, So that's basically the start of it, and then it sort of just really evolved from literally. I was joking with Jordan about this earlier because at Nike, whenever you have an idea, what's the first thing you do? Anybody not from Nike here? You make a PowerPoint. That's about it.
Make a slide.
So that was what I did initially, and I started showing it to people, and the response was really enthusiastic because this message is optimistic. And so it made us realize that there's something to this that needed to be, shared, kind of thing. Yeah.
So you focus primarily on electrification, mostly for consumers in the home,
Yes.
Residential. What do you see right now as the biggest hurdles or challenges or obstacles to overcome to get everybody in this room, or just people who are interested, to move in the direction of home electrification?
It's a good question, and there's lots of them. But the first obstacle is that people don't know how beneficial it is. And so really, and that's kind of at the core of what we try to do with Electrify Now. We're a really small group. It's basically myself, close to full-time, and then a couple of other people who volunteer with us. And so we're really mostly about educating people about all these amazing things, because the thing about electrification is that it's the most powerful lever we have to pull for climate, but it also delivers a better experience in your home, safer environment, more comfortable environment, cleaner air, cleaner water. I mean, it's like almost too good to be true. You'll save money if you do this too. So the upside of it is tremendous, and the first obstacle is painting this picture of the upside around the combination of clean energy and electrification. But even electrification with their energy system the way it is right now, on our way to becoming clean, is already a huge step forward from a climate action standpoint. So the first part is about education, but then after that, the very practical hurdles that you run into, obviously there's financial ones because these things cost money. But on the other hand, this is how fast water heaters are replaced in the United States. And it's not because people want new water heaters, because they really saw a cool one advertised and like, damn, I gotta have a new water heater. It's because your water heater breaks. And it's the same thing with furnaces and all the things that really consume a lot of energy, which the big four are, well, your electricity supply, which we'll talk about, but your furnace, your water heater, and your car. Those three things are by far the largest part of any individual's footprint. And those things have a lifespan that ranges from average of 5 years for an automobile before someone replaces it to 15 years for a furnace, and a water heater somewhere in between. So in other words, you're going to buy a new one of these if you're a homeowner at some point. So the financial hurdle it's a hurdle if you think about, I got to do it tomorrow, but it's something that you're gonna have to do at some point. So but that is a legitimate thing that I don't want to sweep under the rug. And then the other one is the misinformation that's out there. And one of the particularly insidious sources of misinformation are the experts. And those are, because so your water heater breaks. This exact thing happened to me. Mine didn't break, but when we were like, hey, if we're going to try to convince everybody that they should electrify, maybe we better try it ourselves first. And we were able to do this. I'm a retired executive from Nike. I was able to do this. I'm not the benchmark case, right? Sure. So I get that. But so I called literally five plumbers who advertised that they sold heat pump water heaters. And the first four told me I was crazy to get rid of my gas water heater to put in a heat pump. And they all had their own reasons for it, but the reality is that those experts, those people who are the HVAC people, the plumbers, the people who you're going to end up talking to if you're in a transaction like this, and most likely the people you trust because you don't know anything about water heaters or furnaces. I don't know anything about water heaters, no. It's hard to tell them, hard to look at them and go, you're full of shit. It's hard to do that because these guys, that's what they do, right? So that's a real problem. And one of the things we realized really early in doing this is that if we were going to get people excited about doing this, we had to be able to point them to resources that we trusted that would give them A, good service, and B, not try to talk them out of it.
Right.
But I would say here in Portland, for an example, of the probably 50 HVAC installers that there are for furnaces, and most likely every one of those is capable of installing a heat pump for space heating. But it's also likely that 45 of them will tell you that you should put a gas furnace in as a backup right now, which is completely not true. It's false. But it is part of the kind of conservative nature of that industry, I think. And also, to some degree, I respect that there are these guys who have been doing this for 30 years and they just soon do it the way they know how to do, and rather than learn some new trick.
Yeah.
So that's a real issue, the kind of contractor base that, because in these transactions, they're the ones who kind of have the power in the moment of, and so I was getting feedback from people that we talked to where we said, hey, yeah, I really want to do put a heat pump in, and then I called these guys, even people that we had recommended, and they said, I need a gas backup, and it's like, do I need a gas backup? So I'm like holding their hand a little bit, but eventually I just realized I had to have a very short list of people that I could send people to. But that's, we've done the work, and if you're coming at it through Electrify Now, you can have a good experience.
Right.
But for the average person who finds themselves in a situation where their water heater breaks and their relatives are coming for the weekend and you don't want to be without water, the chances that you actually get a heat pump out of that transaction
Pretty low.
is low,
Yeah.
really low.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the biggest issues. And then the third issue is that there is, here in Portland, we see it heavy, big time, is that there is a whole huge industry that is sees the writing on the wall that their future is in danger. That's the natural gas industry in particular. The same with fossil fuels and petroleum, but on the natural gas side, which is where the battle is in terms of homes, they are really good at scaring people about, they want to take your gas away and you won't be comfortable, and we need it for resilience and all this other bullshit stuff that is really not correct, but plays to the kind of fears that people have. So that's the third problem. I would say, roughly speaking, there's a financial problem. There's a contractor willing and educated and excited about electrification contractor base, and then there's this whole misinformation campaign that comes from the industry that got us into this problem in the first place and is holding on to their share of the pie here for as long as possible.
Yeah. So Electrify Now basically provides a schematic, a blueprint to transition to a completely electrified home for everything from heat and cooling to hot water and all of the above, right? Like you sort of have a cheat sheet. You have contractors, you have the plan, like this is how you can transition yourself. Whether you have relatives coming this weekend and you need a new hot water heater, or you just want to be proactive about it. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, and we try to make it really easy for people. So we try to break this big problem into really three things, which is getting clean energy into your house, getting clean electricity, which is the easiest thing to do and the cheapest.
Yeah.
In fact, you can actually save money doing that
Yeah.
through community solar. Does anybody here, just raise a hand, how many here know about community solar? I'm just always curious about this because it feels
I'm
like one of these things
because
that's
of you, through Nike.
It could be.
I think so.
Yeah. But it's one of these things that's like everyone asks, when I explain to them, they go, what's the catch? Because it seems too good to be true. It's 100% clean energy. You'll save about 5% on your electric bill. You don't have to there's no upfront costs and all this sort of stuff. So, but anyway, you can get clean energy really easily. That's step number one. And then step number two is to electrify your home. And I this is the thing I ask people to do. I remember doing this myself. It's like, okay, just close your eyes for a minute and think about all the things in your home that you know about, that you own if you're a homeowner, or if you're a renter, the things that are in your home anyway. Count the number of things in your home that burn fossil fuels. And, in my case, it was like 10 things. We talked about the big ones, furnaces and water heaters, et cetera, but, stoves, barbecues, power tools for your, mowing your lawn and, leaf blowers, all that stuff. Pretty much anything that burns something is a candidate for a replacement. And of course, in terms of environmental impact, there's a huge difference between a lawnmower and a furnace.
Yeah.
But in terms of air quality, there's you'd be surprised at the lawnmower how bad it is, you know.
Yeah.
So but what I like about that sort of menu of options, so to speak, is that almost anybody can do something, you know, like because it's a couple $100 to get a electric leaf blower, let's say, and shit can your gas powered leaf blower, but it's, you know, it could be 15,000 or more for a furnace. So it's nice to have a
range
menu
of entry
of
points.
options.
Yeah. How did your experience at Nike, which, you know, my experience at Nike has been that it's a very, whatever you think of the company, it's a very consumer focused. Like it's everything is through that lens of serving the consumer. How did that experience impact how you're conducting the way you go about, you know, standing up Electrify Now and how you approach, you know, potential convertees?
I think it's probably hard to even know how much that influences it, but I know it influences a lot because, and one of the things that I see is that, you know, I work with a lot of really amazing organizations like Sierra Club, Rocky Mountain Institute, RMI, Rewiring America, Climate Solutions, you know, local nonprofits. So a vast array of really great organizations that are all one way or another working in this space.
Sure.
But none of them come from this background of really understanding how important it is to talk to real people about stuff and convince them partly, but also kind of get energy from that space because most of them are working on the policy level. So they're really good at that. So, which we're not. But what I see is that one of the things that Electrify Now does, which is unique, is that because we have this kind of DIY, take action yourself vibe to what we do, that's really this core of what we do, we're an excellent complement to the policy people because we can talk to policy, like I can talk to a legislator and say, look, I've worked with literally hundreds of people in Oregon who have done these things, and I can tell you every one of them is happy and would never go back to gas. And the people who work in the policy space generally don't have that direct relationship with people doing stuff. So I think that connection is important. And then the other thing is just, you know, you get, because Nike, any of you who know it or don't know it, it's a influence organization. There's essentially no hierarchy there. Or very little. So basically the only way, and you don't really have a lot of control over anything. So the only way to get anything done is to convince a lot of other people that it's a good idea.
That's pretty much it.
So you get good at that.
You've read the book Lord of the Flies? It's exactly that. That's what's happening in Beaver. No, I'm just kidding.
No, it's true.
No, it is. It's
You have to
relationships
get
and
good at
influence.
influence. Yeah.
So
So
it's slide decks.
yeah.
Last question I have, and I'll turn it over to the real Lord of the Flies here. You made this switch from big corporate America, safe, whatever. You retired, and now you're on this kind of new journey, new career arc. What have you learned through that? What are the ups and the downs? What advice would you give to anybody else who might be here in hey, I'm thinking about making a shift in my career and going in this direction to have an impact on climate, and maybe that's scary, maybe that's exciting, maybe that's whatever. Any wisdom you can drop on everybody from your experience in doing this over the last 4 or 5 years?
Well, I mean, first of all, I have to put the disclaimer that I didn't have to feed my family from making this career choice. So I was fortunate that way. So I had the luxury of being able to kind of dabble, so to speak. But so I had this kind of security blanket that way. But I would say that the couple of things I learned that I think would be applicable to anyone is that, one, there's so much going on out there that is like that you don't see when you're when you're like this
totally.
On your career. So the opportunities are amazing, and I think the opportunities are growing all the time, particularly in this space. And one of the most gratifying things about my experience in this is all the amazing people that are out there doing amazing things. It's unbelievable, which is very reassuring in that when you're facing these daunting problems that we have around climate, to know that there's a lot of really smart people working on this, dedicated people. And then the third thing is this sort of related to all that is that this is changing so fast that the opportunities are expanding, and the money that's going into this is profound. And in some ways, I worry as much about our ability to spend the public money that's coming as I worry about the costs. Because, you know, if you're geek out on this stuff like I do, you know, the bottom line is that we will save so much money by transitioning away from fossil fuels to clean energy that it will pay for itself over time, 100%. But in the short term, the money that's coming from the climate protection program, I don't know how many people here are really familiar with that, but that's going to be, you know, tens to hundreds of millions of dollars in just in Oregon. IRA, tons of money. PSEF is already struggling to figure out how to spend the money that they've got. So there are huge opportunities, I think, for people who are interested in this space. I think there's, you know, on the NGO side, the nonprofit side, they're always hungry for people, but in the for-profit space, I think there's tons of opportunities. I mean, it's sort of like, you know, The Graduate, that movie where, you know, someone says it doesn't happen. Plastics. You know, it's like climate. It's like climate. I think so. Or energy, clean energy. You know, I mean, it's crazy. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's not plastics. It's climate.
It's not plastics.
No, I hear you.
Yeah.
But we got to find ways. We have to find endpoints for that investment, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And we may not have enough, which is why people need to start new companies.
Yep.
No, that's awesome. That's good advice. What questions do y'all have? Oh, real quick. Let's go here.
Well, I was just going to say, Brian, so I got to talk to you afterward. I had a guy Tuesday morning who is building these appliances, the water heaters, et cetera, that will be going in brand new appliances, all electric. So I don't know his company name. It's not off the top of my head, but I will get that to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You and him should.
Excellent.
We'll come to you in a second, but I think Adam was next.
Yeah, anybody talking about with all this money that they're struggling to spend, like turning it into stipends for helping to transition homeowners off of gas onto electric, and like, are any electeds talking about this? Is anybody on the NGO side talking about this? And like, how do we talk about that? Because if there is that money, let's make it easy for folks.
You know, it's a good question. I would say that the majority of the focus for spending the avalanche of public money that's coming this way, rightfully so, is focused on equity investments. And I love that because, you know, it's sort of like a win-win-win when we electrify. Like we started this program called Electrify Everyone Fund, where we take donations, and Nike made a huge contribution to this. It was almost like, originally I was thinking about it's almost like a carbon offset fund, but it didn't quite work out that way. But essentially these donations, we work with a local group here called Community Energy Project, and we put in free heat pump water heaters and replace gas water heaters for low income families in Portland area. But the thing is, so these families get, you know, a device that was about to fail gets replaced, which is great. They're going to save probably $200 a year on their utility bills.
That's huge.
And all of them that I talked to, because I went and interviewed a bunch of them when we were doing these installs, were just as excited about the climate benefits as they were saving money.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the idea that these people don't care about climate because they're so worried about feeding themselves and stuff like that is just not true. And also you're creating like safer homes for these people. So you help these people out of energy insecurity. You give them an environment where they're more comfortable and safer and healthier, which therefore they can be more productive. And they're also the ones who've been on the brunt of most of the problems that come from fossil fuels. It's a sort of like I can see why that is the case. So to direct your question, no, I haven't heard about that. And I think part of the reason, apart from these things like the IRA and tax incentives, which is unbelievably good, most of the time the job one is to figure out how we can devote that public money to people who are more in frontline situations. So, and I think that's reasonable. I feel like, personally, the thing that's missing with that equation, though, which I think you're getting to, which is that, okay, this is the way I think about it. If you needed to replace your furnace and it was going to cost your whole heating system and it's going to cost $15,000, let's just say, and you get a loan for and you're looking at this and I'm going to get a loan and the best I can do is 7% or something like that. And you're like, but if you got a free loan for that, then essentially the government would be unlocking this huge amount of private capital for 5 cents on the dollar, something like that, less than that probably. So I just don't understand why there isn't some kind of zero loan kind of option that would enable people to pay back these loans, because you're going to be saving money on your energy bill. So some of that savings goes back to paying off the bill. It doesn't 100% work out, but it helps. And you basically be unlocking all this reserve capital. Because here's another thing I think about a lot with climate change. Like, okay, people say, like I'd say, hey, you should replace your furnace. And you go, I got all these other things I got to do.
It works fine today. Why do I?
Yeah. But compare that to the situation where a tree falls on your house. Right. I mean, are you going to say, nah, I'm not going to do that. I got to go to Hawaii this year, take the kids to Hawaii this year. No, you're going to fix your roof because it's a crisis. So, I think part of the problem we have is that people don't think of their own actions in the same way in this crisis mode. But I guess my point is that in general, if a tree falls on your house, you will figure out some way to pay for it.
How to fix that.
Yeah. So which means that the capital is there somehow for a lot of people. And
it's a cost benefit.
Yeah.
So whether you want to access it.
Yeah. So how do we unlock that capital in a way? And I think some of these financing tools would be amazing. I don't know why we can't do something like that. It seems like it'd be a cheap way for the government, rather than spending the money themselves, to unlock a lot of this capital.
Embedded in your point, though, is also the idea that there's a sense of urgency around this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, climate change is the equivalent of a tree falling in slow motion on your house.
Yeah.
Like, we should get after that.
Yeah.
We'll come back to you, Bill, in a second, because Brian, do I have it right?
Yeah.
Brian had raised his hand earlier, and then we'll go to Bill.
Have you come across organizations or builders of new construction in the Portland area who are on board with sort of electrified homes from the community?
Day zero.
Absolutely, yeah. There are some really good ones. One of the guys I work with, Orange Splat, has done a lot of really good development here. There's a Ichijo, which is doing huge developments out more in the kind of Tigard area. Hundreds of homes at one time are going all electric with some of those. So it is happening, but I think there's this weird thing still where, has anybody gone to what's it called? The
Street of Dreams?
Street of Dreams.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you
How
seen
big
those
is your
recently?
gas stove?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
basically- it's a competition.
It's like a drive-in gas-powered stove. You can park your Hummer in there.
You park your Hummer and cook a burger on
You don't
7.
get that stove at the house, though.
Yeah.
That's the upgrade.
But there is this thing still, which I think is problematic, which is that the public perception of a premium home is a home with a giant ass gas stove in it that looks like it was built 50
Viking
years ago.
range that-
Yeah, with lots of cast iron parts and all this kind of stuff.
Celebrity chefs using production stoves.
Yeah.
So the cooking shows.
Well, here's a fun
That's
fact for you. All the international top chef competitions have been done on induction for years. So it's but here in the United States, there's a lag. It's like that on a lot of things. But I guess my point is that there still is this perception from most builders, which is that if I'm going to build a home and I want a good chance of selling it, I need to put gas in it. So that's still a problem. I do a lot of work with PGE, and they've been starting to do this tours of electrified homes. Like the what do they call it? The dreams, the homes of tomorrow or homes of the future, something like that. And because I think we need the same thing, we need to be able to create get this image in people's heads that electric homes are premium homes, which right now I would say is not the case in general for most people. So even though it's absolutely true. I mean, it's more comfortable, it's easier to clean, it's lower
Yeah.
cost to maintain, all these,
Yeah.
you go down the list.
Yeah.
But it's not the perception. Yeah.
I want to come to both of you. I'm sorry, but Bill did have his hand up, and then we'll come right to both of you, Juliana.
For a second. So, 2 months ago, I reached out to a friend, Talia Porter, who I guess was appointed by Governor Brown. She's the one dispersing the Inflation Reduction Act. So the financing, this was back to the financing. I don't know how that's going to transition. Like, I don't know if she'll still be the person that Tina Kotek will have, but there is there will be money available, you know, at least in Oregon, every state has its own little, you know, pot. But again, Leah Horner is the place to start. I don't know if she's going to continue or if someone else will backfill, but that might be something to look into. So.
Yep.
Juliana.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned PGE. So what is
We'll come
being
to you
done to bolster the infrastructure so if we are 100% reliant on energy, on electricity to move away from gas,
Yeah.
natural gas?
Yep.
Just this week, my daughter's school was canceled because their power was out. So
Yeah,
what are we
yeah.
doing to build up the infrastructure so that we can feel like it's
Yeah.
not a
Yeah.
risk to not be diversified in
Yeah.
our power sources?
Yeah. I first need to answer a question you didn't ask, but is embedded in that question. It's a good question. The first thing is that this idea that having natural gas in our homes make us more resilient is a questionable assumption. The gas utilities play this up big time, but your furnace won't work because it has an electric fan in it. Your water heater probably won't work unless it's an older one. Your gas stove, cook stove will work, but the ventilation that you need in order to keep from poisoning yourself when you use it won't work. So you got to be really careful and open windows and all that kind of stuff. If you have a gas fireplace, which a relatively small number of homes have, but that's the one device that has a kind of resilience benefit because at least that one room will stay warm. So first thing I think is that there's this myth that gas gives us this sort of resilience in power outages that is kind of only sort of true. So I always feel like I have to say that. But the other part of your question about making the grid more resilient is a really good one, and it's going to be hard, but there are the things that I'm excited about there. Some of them are systemic in terms of the way the electric companies get smarter about figuring out how to set their systems up so they won't go out in the first place. There's that. I'm not that smart about that part of it. The things I'm more excited about are the things that are available to us as homeowners that look really promising in terms of resilient solutions. And the number one thing is our automobiles. I mean, we're just years away, I think, from the situation where the EV that's sitting in your garage or your parking lot or whatever, at least for people who have, single family detached homes, this is not going to be quite as simple in apartments and things. But for homeowners like that, you've got a week's worth of energy sitting in your garage, or
Inside your EV.
inside your EV.
Yeah.
And it's begging to be used for this. And there's some technical hurdles with that, but they're not insurmountable. And there's hacks that are already available to get us close to that. So I guess I feel like the grid of the future, which has a more robust, utility scale grid to begin with, but there's always going to have issues with storms and things like that. I don't know that that's ever going to completely go away, but you have a more robust grid, and then you've got microgrids and also the vehicle to grid solution, which gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of on-demand power. I think it's going to make the power outage thing less scary. I don't know that it will ever go away as a problem, but I think it will be less of an issue once those things happen.
Is there any movement to bury power lines so that they're not as
Yeah.
vulnerable to storms?
I'm not hearing about that. I mean, I just, my guess is it's just the expense associated with that is probably problematic, but I don't know. I'm not an expert on that. I'm not hearing anything about that, though. Yeah.
I was told by, no, I'm not an expert in this, and I'm stepping into dangerous ground, but a gentleman from PGE once told me that when we get an earthquake here, your gas is going to be out for a long time and your electrical will come back a lot faster. And so from a resilience perspective, yes, like windstorms, sure.
Yeah.
But like wait until we get a big one, and then you're gonna really wish your whole house was electrified,
Yeah,
is what he
absolutely.
said. So
I
I
mean,
don't know how true that is.
No, I mean, I lived
But that's
through
what he told me.
I
and
lived
was
through
like,
the
oh,
San Francisco
interesting.
earthquake, and
Yeah.
that was 100% true.
Yeah.
Your
So-
gas
so-
was out for almost a month, but the electricity
Yeah.
was out for 2 days.
The next thing I Googled after that was, how do I make my EV power my house? It was literally the next thing I did. I was like, oh, that's harder than it sounds. So,
Well, and if it happens in the summer, you have distributed power generation.
sure. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Katie.
Your answer to that question was the also
Okay.
answer to my
All right, great.
Because my family lives in Texas, and after the big
Oh, yeah.
outage that they had, my parents actually bought a home generator that
Yeah.
went on the gas line
Yeah.
as a solution for
Yeah.
future
Yeah.
life-threatening power outage situations,
Yeah.
which I can only assume are going to get worse before than if they ever get better. So
Yeah.
that was basically my
Mhm.
like, what advice do you have for a homeowner now who's really worried about, what do I do next time a tree falls on the power line? It's out for 5 days. I live in, Malala. And
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
took forever to get to me.
Or North Portland.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of really relatively low cost sort of like survival hacks you can do, which are really effective. Like for $1,500, you can set yourself up so that you can cook, you can have lights, you can charge your phones and your computers and all that kind of stuff. You're not going to be able to heat your house. I mean, heat is the thing that takes the most energy. But literally, with one of these small batteries and a induction hot plate and some rechargeable lights, you can kind of camp in your house relatively indefinitely that way. If you've got an EV, you can charge that little battery from it. So there's ways to like do low cost sort of hacks to get through the. I call it surviving a power outage. Not like it's not the same as. It's not the same as like, when the lights go off, the generator kicks on and your lights flicker for a minute and then you're back to watching, primetime TV. No.
Think about I work at a big hospital.
Yeah.
When you think about those places who do really need
Yeah.
full power backup.
I think to me that is like a really good use for fossil fuels. is an on-site diesel generator to power the hospital. Like I'm all in on that. And it's not going to cause climate havoc. I think at least in the short term, I'm down with that. Yes, let's use fossil fuels that way.
I had heard about that as well.
Perfect.
Once a car battery gets between 60 and 70%, that's when they do a swap.
Yeah.
Just like you do it on your phone. They stack them up, and because they only have one cycle every 5 years, they stack them up. Take them
My
to the
personal
hospital.
resiliency strategy is I just.
Well, it's required for labs. It's
Yeah.
required for labs to have 3 forms of backup.
Yeah.
And now battery backup is one of those 3. It
Yeah.
used to be diesel, gas, electric.
And there's going to be more and more of these.
A lot of car batteries coming.
There
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
I think we learned from Hurricane Sandy though, is don't put all that stuff in the basement.
Yeah, don't.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna go with one more question. I think Simon, you were up, and then we're probably gonna wrap it up. And if you want to like Shanghai Brian afterwards to ask him your question, he may be able to stick around for a little bit.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
last formal question will go to Simon.
Okay, there's a lot of pressure now.
It's all up to you, Simon.
I was just
Close strong.
playing off what the discussion was here, because one of the things I've been hearing is that solar and what role does rooftop solar have?
Yeah.
A lot of the solar companies are claiming that in Florida during the storms, their people wall up and didn't lose their power because you're taking it from the roof.
Yeah.
And what kind of role does that have for you? And also, there's another group of contractors out there that are specialists in energy auditing and tightening the home, getting rid of drafts and all that kind of stuff, so making it more energy efficient.
Yeah.
Which is another thing that can fit into your packages.
Yeah.
Wondering if you are working with any of those.
The two good questions. First on solar, I'm a huge fan of solar. I think that there's if your house is right for it, there's a lot of ifs associated with it. But having said that, like you have to have the right sort of house, not too many trees around it. Here in Portland, at least, and for it to make financial sense for you, you kind of have to be pretty sure you're going to be in the house for 7 years probably. So those are two big ifs. And you also have to have the money up front to do it. A third big if. But if you can check the box on those three things, you should do it because you will save money in the long term. It's one of the best things you can do for the grid because we need this distributed energy generation is absolutely an essential part of the future, in my opinion. And like you say, from a resilience standpoint, particularly once we get to this vehicle to grid thing, you will be able to, run the house on your car battery and then recharge your car battery with your solar, which is great. I'm a little bit on the fence about advocating people purchase like Powerwalls and lithium batteries for whole home backup because, if you can afford it, it's great, but it's hugely expensive, and I kind of feel like it's a waste of a really important resource personally because those lithium batteries are sitting there not being used like 99.999% of the time. And we need those batteries in cars where they're being used every day. So I'm a little bit on the fence about full home backup systems for that reason. And personally, I'm kind of willing to wait a couple of years with my hack systems until I can just use my car because it's sitting there. And it's 3 times the size of a home backup battery system that I could afford. And it's just waiting to be used. So I think the home backup battery thing is a short-term flash in the pan solution that's going to go away as something that's important. But solar, absolutely. But that combination, hugely important. The other part of your question was about efficiency, basically, and home efficiency. And the answer to that is yes, home efficiency is really important. And a lot of people will tell you it's the lowest hanging fruit in terms of climate action is efficiency. I have a little bit of a beef with that argument, though, because I feel like, I don't care what house you live in, you should get a heat pump in it. I don't care how shitty it is in terms of the insulation or anything, because you will be doing the right thing. If you can do both those things, then absolutely. But if you can only do one of them, get the heat pump. And there will be colleagues of mine who will argue against that point of view, but the reason why I feel that strongly about it is because I feel that there is a blocker in the environmental movement, which is efficiency. And it comes from this mindset that came from decades ago when really efficiency was the only thing we had to do. Like in the 1970s, if you wanted to do the right climate thing, the only solution you had was to use less of everything. And that still makes sense. But if people get stuck on that and don't see that they have a responsibility to not just use less fossil fuels, but to get off it 100% and switch to renewable energy, then those people end up being blockers for the future. So my beef with efficiency is it can be a dead end for people and an excuse not to do the thing that we really need people to do, which is to get off of fossil fuels, not use less of it.
Yeah.
And so the combination of efficiency and electrification, though, is the holy grail. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it.
Just a comment on that. You approached it I agree with you. From saying that staying on fossil fuels is a blocker as sort of a negative thing. There's also the positive thing that getting more use of electricity as opposed to fossil fuels sends signals to policy and industry.
Yes.
That making more renewable energy available would have a greater impact, and that there's more market for selling.
Yes.
A massive demand signal will drive supply and sophistication.
So can you tell I work in supply chain?
This is one of the things that when I was telling you about my wife getting excited about me coming in and saying, God, well, this is what take a guess at how much people like you and I, just regular people, this is not industry, not government, just regular consumers, energy consumers like us. Guess how much we spend on energy per year, cumulative in the United States? All us little people. Any idea?
$1 trillion. It's got to be huge. It's got to be huge.
Okay. Do I hear 50 billion?
It's gotta be more.
100 billion.
100 million.
It's $500 billion.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Okay, so my point there is that people like you and I are spending $500 billion every year on energy. And we're essentially funding climate change through our electric bill, our heat bill, and the gas we put in our cars. And it's entirely possible for every one of us, instead of spending that, it works out to about $4,000 per person per year. You could spend less than that. You could get the same energy needs covered with about $3,000 per year and be spending all that money on the solutions rather than the problem. So that's why I'm really convinced that this personal action thing is really powerful and important, because, you know, one of the things that got me to do this in the first place was I literally heard this quote from this guy who had just won the Nobel Prize for some article some study he'd done about how bad the climate was, and thank God we have people like that. But the person who was interviewing asked him, like, what can regular people do about this? And he said, well, there's not much that regular people can do, but you can drive slower and inflate your tires and get LED light bulbs. And I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Is that the best you got? I mean, this is a guy who's like a climate expert.
Nobel Prize.
Yeah. And he said, basically, we really need corporations and governments to get together to solve this problem. And that's true. But the idea that we just throw people like you and I, who spend $500 billion a year on energy, under the bus and say we got no agency in this is just not true.
We are the demand signal. We can
yes.
drive the demand signal
Yes,
if we choose
absolutely.
to do so.
That's how the American government works. We gotta drive it. They're not gonna drive us.
Gotta make it go viral.
And and it's going to be a lot easier to do policy when you've got people like
Yeah.
We're doing it because we want to. It makes it easier to have policy that tilts the playing field in that direction.
You can buy products from companies that have science-based targets.
Yeah.
I promise. Okay, we'll count you as a half a question. Go quick. We're always gonna shut it down.
To reply to the thing about
Yeah.
insulation versus heat pumps,
Yeah.
I think one thing to consider, and I think I'm aligned with you. I think one thing to consider is that the heat pump can only be so effective in a house that's like actually keeps the heat in, because they really don't work at low temperatures. So I think it's like if you can do both,
Yes.
if you can do something, do something. Like
Yeah.
I think
Yeah. I agree with you. I sort of like, you know, I'm it's always good to be energy efficient. It is. I don't talk about it with people because I feel like, you know, if like a good HVAC contractor, if he comes into your house, he'll say, look, you know, I can put in a heat pump and it'll work, but it'll work a lot better if you insulate your attic. I mean, a good contractor will tell you that. So I don't feel like I need to tell people to like think about that first. I think I need to get people there to understand that a heat pump is the future, you know, and you know, they're incredibly effective. I was talking to the guy from Mitsubishi about this exact topic because we have a webinar coming up in 2 weeks on cold climate heat pumps, which are amazing. And I asked him about this, like, well, are there any requirements? Would you recommend requirements for the building envelope in order to put these things in to be effective? And he goes, no. He says they'll work anywhere in any house, but it's true that you will spend less. Your electric bill will go down if you insulate your house. So that's the slippery slope about it. But yes, it's always true that efficiency is better.
Please join me to say thank you one more time to Brian for joining us. Brian came and did this very last minute. We wanted to approach Brian about coming to you all in like February or March of next year, and then someone got COVID, and we were like, hey, Brian, how do you feel about Friday? And I think this was Wednesday, and Brian was like, I'm all in. So like, double extra thank you for Brian being so flexible. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Topher, again for helping organize this. Thank you, Brian. Awesome. Appreciate it. Yeah, it was awesome.
Fun. Yeah.
About that moderator.
I'm just here to...
Thank you so much, William.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, thanks for the good questions. Yeah.
I was trying to like get different angles. You know, but this is the
Oh, cool. Thank you. Yeah. Great weekend. All right.